What's going on, everyone? Sad video for today for a couple of reasons. The first one being, of course, Holden has officially shut down, and I figured I would make a video on it because I had some people ask me about it, and they're kind of in the same boat that Saab and a lot of other GM-owned brands were about 10, 12 years ago when GM shut a bunch of other brands down. So hopefully this doesn't trigger like a second wave of all that happening. Thankfully the economy is much better this time around and all that. But before I get into the details of that story, I wanted to bring up the second, I guess, sad topic, at least for some of you in this video, and that is that we finally sold our 9.5 wagon. I was actually planning on filming a video with it this morning, and it sold last night. So we had a lot of interest in it. It was only for sale for about 3 or 4 days. We got full asking price, which was about $1,700. Hopefully the new owner takes care of it and it lives to hopefully at least hit that 300,000 mile mark, because it's not super far away. It's already at like 266. Well, with that being said, let's get into the topic of today's video, and that is, of course, that GM has announced that they're killing yet another car brand. So I guess I should start off by kind of giving a very brief background on Holden. So Holden is basically an Australian car manufacturer, and they sold most of their cars in Australia and New Zealand. They did export to some other countries as well. I know that whenever we'd go down to Mexico, or that, you know, we'd be anywhere close to Mexico, you'll see Holdens every now and then, but they were exported to Asia and a few other places around the world as well, but they're predominantly in Australia and New Zealand. And if you look at any pictures of any newer Holdens, you'll realize that pretty much all of them look very similar to a lot of other GM cars. For example, this one right here looks very similar to the Chevy SS, because it is pretty much the same thing. This one here looks pretty much identical to the Pontiac G8. There's of course some older cars, so we get some more variation here, but this is probably the car that Holden is most known for, especially in recent years, and that is the Ute. The Ute is really a cool car just because it's a sedan. It's basically a sedan, it's just on a sedan chassis, but it's a truck, and they tended to make them very fast. Basically V8 rear-wheel drive, you know, all that good stuff from, I guess, GM. But this has really been a story for Holden that has kind of been almost a decade in the making, because back, I believe it was towards the end of 2013, GM announced that they were going to stop making all Holden cars by the end of 2017. And at the end of 2017, they were going to shut down Holden's last manufacturing plant in Australia. So really at that point, by the time that plant shut down, it was pretty clear that Holden was pretty much dead. Although they did continue to sell cars that were literally just rebadged Chevys and you know, other GM products. So at the end of 2017, let me just clarify that again. At the end of 2017, Holdens were not done being produced per se, but like, I guess you could say genuine Holden cars that were made in Australia were done being produced, and that also resulted in like 3,000 or 4,000 people losing their jobs. So thanks, GM. So a quote from this article here I'm looking at kind of just sums up what I just said pretty well. It says, "The last Commodore sold in Australia wasn't a rear-wheel drive sedan, but a rebadged version of the Opel Insignia, aka Buick Regal, here in the US. So again, their cars at the end were just completely rebadged, and it seems like a lot of GM brands that they own, they pretty much just go like with the Malibu, and then they apply the Malibu to like 6 other brands and just change a couple little things about it in the name, and then that's pretty much it. So it's kind of, you know, cost savings, I get it, but it's a little bit, you know, I don't think it's a great idea personally. I think this quote is a little bit funny here. "The decision to kill Holden was strictly financial, according to a statement by the company." Of course it was financial. What other reason would they have for shutting down the company? Do they just have personal beef with the Holden higher-ups and they just wanted to kill their beloved brand and they hate the people of Australia? Like, what other reasoning would they have? Of course it's financial. GM has proved time and time again they can't manage certain, especially niche car companies like a Holden or a Saab. Time and time again they prove they can't do it. So in reality, this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. But I just think it's a little bit, I guess, maybe naive that they said it was strictly financial. I mean, what other reasoning would there be? But this is a very fair point here. They do say, considering Australia and New Zealand, which of course, like I said, is where pretty much all the Holdens were sold, make up less than 1% of the global market, having to produce and ship region-specific right-hand drive variants of cars was just too expensive to justify. And of course, like you know, Holdens were not like a Chevy, you know, they're not popular, very popular all around the world, or a Ford. They're more of a niche car brand, at least they turned into that more towards the end. So not to say that they weren't popular anywhere, because that's not true, but in most markets they were not a top seller. So it's kind of just, you know, the fact of the matter. One other interesting point here that I do want to make before I forget is that some of you might know the 2.8 V6 motor, the GM motor that is put in the 9.3 Aero, and my Turbo X right behind me was actually built in Australia. So I've gotten some questions as to if that will affect parts availability for that motor. Personally, I have no idea. I don't think it will, but I do want to also point out right here that spare parts and servicing networks will continue to be available for at least 10 years. And then I assume at that point, Holden will have their own version of like ESOB parts. They'll have e-Holden parts, and everything will be happy, and you can still get parts that you need for Holdens, because there's clearly still a lot of Holdens on the road. There's a lot of enthusiast-owned Holdens. So I really think that Holden is kind of in a similar boat that Saab was about 10 years ago. And Saab is, you know, the brand is still alive and well, still plenty of enthusiasts, still have plenty of parts availabilities, especially for any GM era Saab. So I think the same will be true for Holden. So here's a little bit of insult to injury, in my opinion at least. General Motors will still plan on selling niche vehicles from its lineup in the region and will replace the Commodore in the country's supercar series with the Chevy Camaro. So they're basically going to say, we're not going to sell your car anymore, but here's our shitty variant of your car that we're going to now sell in your region and to you. So I think Holden enthusiasts would not like that very much. I mean, think of it this way. Imagine if Saab got killed and then a year later in Sweden, GM's like, hey, we're going to bring back your 9.3 in a way. We're just going to make it look different and call it a Chevy something. And yeah, I don't think that's going to necessarily go over super well, in my opinion at least, especially considering Chevy plans on killing the Camaro in, what is it, 3 years? Because their sales are so trash. I feel like this video is really kind of turned into like a GM hate video, and in a way that makes me very happy, because sometimes it's just fun to like shit on GM just because it's GM. But I think with that being said, guys, that's really all I've got for today. Let me know your thoughts on Holden below. Obviously, I've never owned one. Like I said, really very even limited experience seeing them. But for those of you that live in Europe, or anyone that actually lives in Australia or anywhere where the Holdens were popular, let me know your thoughts on them down below. Were they good cars? Were they bad cars? I know they were fast and they were supposed to be fun. I mean, especially the V8 powered ones. I mean, not all of them had V8s, of course. But with that being said, that's it for today. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a big thumbs up. I'll see you all next time.